With all of our players, Mary Kay, there's things that we can do better, and there's some good moments out there, but that's what our job as coaches, to develop.
No, I gotta watch the film, honestly. I can't say what it was. It's definitely a different place where I could got my eyes in better spots and got to the progressions quicker and regards to anything, so all those sacks, they definitely on me.
This wasn't nerves. This wasn't a learning curve. This felt like a setup from the start. When Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the field for his NFL preseason debut, the hype was undeniable. The son of Dion, a rising quarterback with a legacy name and a college resume to back it up. Fans were ready. Cameras were rolling. The moment was his. But something was wrong. From the first snap, it was chaos. No protection. No rhythm. Teammates who couldn't keep up. And plays that looked like they were stolen from someone else's game plan. Before anyone could blink, the headlines came flying in, overhyped. Not ready. Just another media darling. But analysts and insiders saw something else, something far more disturbing.
Shedeur Sanders is not their priority. When he is at practice, he was staying hours beforehand, leaving hours later.
Stephen A. Smith didn't hold back. He called it for what it was, a calculated ambush. And if that's true, then this wasn't just a failed debut. It was a preseason hit job, because the way Shedeur was thrown into that game, the way coaches handled him, the silence afterwards, it has people asking one question. Was Shedeur Sanders set up to fail? On paper, it should have been a moment of promise. Shedeur Sanders, college standout, film rat, and son of Hall of Famer Deion Sanders finally stepping onto an NFL field. The buzz was unstoppable.
I understand in a situation like that, when it comes to the 3s and 4s that you're playing with that aren't going to be on the squad and not going to make the team, give your quarterback a chance. Okay, you know what? You know they can't hold up that long? Let's play quick game.
Social media lit up with clips, predictions, and endless debates. Was this the next breakout QB? Would Shedeur redefine the position like his father redefined cornerbacks? The air was electric. But once the game began, something didn't sit right. From the very first snap, the offense looked broken. Shedeur was surrounded by third stringers, unknown receivers who couldn't get open, linemen who buckled at the first sign of pressure, running backs offering little support. People brushed it off at first. It's just preseason. It's just nerves. Right? Wrong. The collapse wasn't just physical, it was systemic. There was zero chemistry on the field. No timing, no rhythm. Plays were being called like they'd been copied and pasted out of a completely different playbook, one built for someone with different strengths, different experience, maybe even a different future.
Just to get Shedeur in a goddamn rhythm, but no, you come out, calling regular offensive plays.
When they're at practice, Shedeur Sanders is not their priority. When he is at practice, he was staying hours beforehand, leaving hours later.
And anyone who's been around football long enough knows this didn't look like a genuine evaluation. It looked like something much more calculated. The critics arrived fast, ready to write him off with lazy labels, overhyped, not NFL ready, writing the Sanders name. But deeper voices in the game, former players, respected analysts weren't buying it. They saw through the box score and into what was really happening on that field. Because there's a difference between a rough debut and being set up to fail. Shedeur wasn't operating behind the Browns' first or even second-team offensive line. He wasn't working with quality reps leading up to the game. He had receivers who had little to no practice with him. And still, they dialed up slow developing plays that gave defenses time to close in and crush the pocket.
I'm outraged, I'm sickened, and I'm saddened. By the way, Shedeur continues to be treated in the National Football League, now by those sorry-ass Browns and sorry-ass Kevin Stefanski.
What part of that looks like preparing a young quarterback for success? This wasn't bad luck. It started to feel intentional. And while most rookies are given short passes and safe options to get their feet wet, Shedeur was thrown into the deep end with no lifeline, no rollout packages, no quick outs, no protection schemes to give him a fighting chance, just chaos and a fast track to criticism. If the goal was development, nothing about it supported that.
I'm outraged, I'm sickened, and I'm saddened. By the way, Shedeur continues to be treated in the National Football League, now by those sorry-ass Browns and sorry-ass Kevin Stefanski.
If the goal was exposure, well, mission accomplished. But the people watching closely saw through the noise. They clocked the timing, the mishandled roster choices, the awful matchups. And as frustration boiled over across sports media, one uncomfortable question started echoing louder and louder. If this is how you treat a rookie with discipline, pedigree, and promise, what's really going on behind the scenes? Because this debut didn't just look like a missed opportunity. It felt like something the NFL would rather you not ask questions about.
Win because Ocho was just a better player. Sometimes the defensive back is going to win. He wins some, you win more than you lose.
As the game spiraled into disaster, a strange silence came from the Browns sideline. No adjustments, no urgency, no visible support for a young QB silently drowning on national television. But while the coaching staff stayed quiet, the sports world lit up and they weren't sugarcoating anything. Stephen A. Smith was one of the first to sound the alarm. He didn't tiptoe. He didn't couch his words in rookie growth talk. He looked straight into the camera and said what a lot of people were already thinking. This wasn't just poor coaching. This looked like a setup. He didn't just blame the play calling, he dismantled it.
You just beat the guy. And that's okay. You get paid, he gets paid. Sometimes Ocho just goes
Play by play, decision by decision. Smith pointed out how Shedeur, a rookie quarterback already under immense pressure, wasn't given the basic tools to stabilize a debut. No quick routes, no screen plays to settle nerves, no tempo control. Instead, he was given slow developing pass schemes and zero protection. And if that sounds deliberate, you're not alone. Garrett Bush, a respected Cleveland sports analyst with deep connections to the organization, echoed the same concern. He called the entire situation calculated, slamming the Browns for not giving Shedeur a fair chance. According to Bush, Shedeur was buried on the depth chart all week, barely getting meaningful reps even in practice. He emphasized one damning point. This wasn't a test of ability, it was a performance staged for failure.
I'm going to answer this question by saying Shedeur Sanders, and I'm going to tell you why. I think he's being set up to...
And Skip Bayless? He took it one step further. Known for his often blunt and sometimes brutal commentary, Skip didn't hold back. He labeled the Browns' handling of Sanders as the worst outing support for a rookie he'd seen in years. He wasn't just mad, he was done playing polite. Bayless argued that the coaching staff wasn't building a star, they were framing a collapse. A narrative was being crafted before our eyes, and Shedeur just happened to be the face they attached it to. He even questioned the intention behind letting Sanders run behind a makeshift offensive line with unfamiliar receivers against a defensive unit playing like it was mid-season. Now, pause for a second. That's a lot of high-profile people, not just criticizing the performance, but criticizing the intent behind it. Because when multiple respected voices across media all start saying the same thing, it's usually not a coincidence. Some even speculated Shedeur's confident demeanor, his calm presence, his father's shadow, his refusal to beg for handouts made him harder to mold, harder to control. That perhaps letting him succeed on day one didn't fit certain narratives the franchise wanted to protect. And let's be real, we've seen this before. A young, talented quarterback gets fast-tracked to failure. The excuses roll out, he's too raw, he's not ready, he needs years of development. But what no one ever says is this: sometimes the guy fails because that's exactly what the playbook was designed to do. And Shedeur Sanders might have just become the latest example. Because this wasn't just critics doing Monday morning quarterbacking. This was live fire from analysts during the game, calling out something deeper, something designed. By now, it was clear this wasn't just a bad night under the lights. The deeper you looked, the less it resembled a misstep, and more like a carefully staged fall. And that's when things got real. Because what happened to Shedeur Sanders on that NFL field wasn't just about dropped passes or blitzes off the edge, it was about the entire structure around him collapsing on cue. This was manufactured failure. From the roster decisions to the play designs, everything looked like it was stacked against him. Shedeur didn't get to run with the Browns' starting offensive line, not even with the second unit. He was paired with guys who weren't going to make the team. Fringe roster players, camp bodies, practice squad hopefuls. And yet, people were acting like this was a fair assessment of his readiness. Let's be clear, no rookie, no matter how talented, succeeds in a situation like that. There was no chemistry between him and the receivers. They couldn't get separation. They weren't reading the routes in sync. As for the line, they crumbled moments after the snap. Blitzes came in unblocked. Pass rushers had a clear lane every drive. And through it all, the coaching staff sat motionless on the sideline, no in-game adjustments, no timeouts to regroup, no visible effort to settle their quarterback. And then we get to the play calling. The ultimate red flag. Instead of simplified calls designed to help a young quarterback build confidence, quick throws, screens, rhythm plays, what did they go with? Long developing, complex passing schemes that require precise timing, clean pockets, and everything Shedeur was purposely not handed. Running those kinds of plays behind a collapsing third-string line isn't just unfair, it's reckless. And worse, it looks tactical. There were no rollout options to buy time, no max protection packages, no set plays to neutralize an aggressive pass rush. Just Shedeur, alone in the pocket, against live NFL pressure, with no tools to survive. When you run those kinds of plays for an experienced starter, it's aggressive. When you run them for a rookie, it's a setup. Even longtime players and NFL insiders came forward anonymously, calling the Browns' game plan inexcusable and tone-deaf at best, strategic at worst. The quiet consensus? This wasn't designed to nurture Shedeur, it was made to expose him. And this is where things start to click. Because when a high-profile young quarterback gets minimal reps at practice, is handed the least experienced teammates, and runs a playbook that doesn't match his strengths, that's not development. That's dismantling a reputation before it even has the chance to be built. And what's worse, they knew cameras were watching. They knew this would be the moment sports talk shows would latch onto. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point to make him look like the problem before he could become a part of the solution. The NFL doesn't need to bench you anymore. All they have to do is throw you in the wrong system and let the world blame you for drowning. And when the headlines come out, the damage is already done. Here's where it shifts. Because, see, this starts to feel less like football and more like narrative control. More like the NFL didn't know what to do with a QB like Shedeur Sanders, not because he lacked talent, but because he didn't fit in their box. Because the problem with Shedeur, it wasn't his mechanics, it wasn't his football IQ, it was who he is, where he came from, and how he operated. While most rookies spend their quiet offseason posting beach photos or launching early brand deals, Shedeur was in the tape room. Not just studying defenses, rebuilding footwork, fine-tuning mechanics, memorizing schemes before he ever even knew what team he'd land on. Coaches described him as obsessive. Analysts said he was already more mentally prepared than some current starters. He wasn't showing up late, learning on the fly. He was first in, last out every single day. So ask yourself, why would a player with that level of preparation be treated like a throwaway project? Because Shedeur isn't just a rookie. He's Deion Sanders' son. He's a legacy athlete. He carries the weight of expectation on his name and the swagger that comes with surviving under an unforgiving spotlight. And for some franchises, that kind of presence is uncomfortable. He's outspoken but controlled, confident but never cocky on the mic. He refuses to play the wide-eyed rookie role. He walked into the league like he expected to be there, and a lot of people didn't like that. There's an unspoken rule in NFL circles. Act humble, play humble, wait your turn. Rookie QBs are supposed to earn scraps. They're expected to quietly wait for a moment that may or may not come. Shedeur came in acting like his moment was now, and that rattled some cages. And let's talk about the obvious. Race, image, and assumption. A young black quarterback, raised in the spotlight, unafraid to be vocal, entering the league with both skill and swagger, that's not a formula the NFL has historically embraced easily. And while progress has been made, the truth is there's still immense pressure on these QBs to tone themselves down, to fit the mold of the humble grinder. Shedeur didn't. He owned his space. And for some insiders, that turned into an easy narrative. He's writing his father's name. He's a fifth-round talent getting media buzz he doesn't deserve. That wasn't coming from fans, that was coming from voices inside the league. Framing the content, speculative. Reports suggest that some scouts labeled him media-made, saying he hadn't proven anything at the pro level and should be handled like a long shot, no favors, no fast tracks. So that's what the Browns gave him. No favors. They placed him on the lowest rung and threw him into a bad hand. Because in their eyes, it wasn't about helping him succeed. It was about proving that he couldn't. But ask yourself this. If Shedeur Sanders had the mindset of a franchise QB, why was he given the treatment of a walk-on? Why wasn't he even given a fair shot to show what he could do? Simple. Maybe success from someone like Shedeur doesn't fit the story they're trying to tell. When everything crashed, when the pocket collapsed, when the media came swarming and the critics circled like sharks, Shedeur did something nobody expected. He said everything was his fault. Not out of panic, not because he was scared of backlash, but because he understood something every real leader learns early: you protect your team, even when the team failed you. After a game where he was sacked repeatedly, isolated from top-tier reps, and publicly criticized in headlines hours later, the cameras turned toward him. Every reporter expected the same thing: frustration, blame, even just a crack in his composure. Instead, they got this: all those sacks, they're on me. Just like that, with one sentence, Shedeur took ownership of a disaster the coaching staff hadn't even been willing to speak on. No mention of the third-string offensive line that folded like paper. No complaints about the long developing plays that worked against his strengths. No jabs at the receivers who couldn't get open. Just pure accountability, unfiltered, real, and more mature than most veterans in his position. And here's the thing, it wasn't just about deflecting drama, it was a calculated move. Because while everyone around him played the PR game, coaches dodging blame, media grilling him, fans split between sympathy and skepticism. Shedeur remained focused on the long game. He talked about watching tape, correcting his reads, getting to progressions faster next time. Next time. Felt bold even saying that out loud, because after that kind of setup, most rookies don't get a second chance. But this wasn't damage control, it was discipline. Inside NFL circles, word travels fast. Coaches watch not just how you play, but how you lose, how you respond to chaos, unfair treatment, pressure, and public doubt. And while people expected Shedeur to clap back, go viral, throw shade at Stefanski or the Browns regime, he did the opposite. He stayed silent, deliberately. And sometimes silence says more than a mic drop ever could. The same coaches who overlooked him, they also saw how he handled this moment. Analysts took notice. Even the ones who had doubts before started shifting their tone. It was no longer about did he play well. It was about how he carried himself when everything fell apart. Because most rookies, they would have cracked. But Shedeur left that post-game interview standing taller than he did walking in. The Browns had thrown him into the fire. The system failed him across the board. But when it came time to speak, Shedeur didn't burn anyone else to stay warm. He didn't lash out. He didn't beg for sympathy. He stayed locked in on growth. And that's the trait front offices don't measure at the combine. You can't put it in a scouting report. But when a young quarterback stares down national criticism and says, "Blame me," he just passed a test far more important than any scrimmage. And still, the weight is real. How long can one player carry the failure of everyone else? That kind of emotional weight, it silences a lot of promising careers. The spotlight doesn't always reveal talent. Sometimes, it buries it. Shedeur didn't bury anything. He stood in it, owned it, walked forward. But the question hanging in the air, he'll never say it out loud, is this: why was he put in that position in the first place? The moment Shedeur Sanders took ownership of that broken debut, the room changed. Everyone watching, critics, fans, even haters, saw it. He wasn't just answering questions. He was revealing something the entire NFL has tried to keep in the background. Some quarterbacks are never given a real chance. Not because of their skill set, but because of their story. And the deeper you look, the more obvious it becomes. Shedeur isn't the first raw talent dropped into an impossible situation, only to be labeled a failure before he ever had the chance to play his game. Every few years, it happens. A black quarterback enters the league with confidence, skill, and presence. He's not afraid to lead, not afraid of the moment. He doesn't play the humble, grind-in-silence character. He stands tall, speaks with clarity, believes in his preparation. And somehow, just like clockwork, the league starts rewriting his story before it's even begun. He's not ready. He's too raw. He's emotional. Does he have the right attitude? It becomes less about talent and all about tone. Shedeur's story mirrors that cycle almost perfectly. A college powerhouse with a relentless work ethic, a reputation for deep film study, and a mental game sharper than most veterans. But the moment things went wrong, not entirely because of him, everyone lined up to push the same tired message. Maybe he's not cut out for the big stage. But how do you expect a quarterback to succeed when you give him the league's leftovers? How do you evaluate development when you send a starter-level mind into a situation with fourth-string blockers and untested receivers? And more importantly, Why does this only happen to certain players? This isn't just about race. This is about image, perception, and control. It's about a league that knows how to tell stories and how to bury them. Because the truth is, the NFL doesn't just build players, it builds narratives. And when a prospect walks in with confidence, legacy, ambition, or swagger the league doesn't like, they don't have to attack him directly. All they have to do is tweak the setting around him, just enough to make failure look like it was his fault. It's subtle. You give him the wrong teammates, you cut his practice reps to a minimum plans of the planned and fouled. You hand him the slowest play calls you can find in the book. You send him out there unprepared and undersupported. And you let the world watch it fall apart. Then you say, see, not ready. Just like you planned. And you know it's strategic because when the other rookies struggle once, the league already believes in the excuses come flooding in. He just needs time. That's part of the process. They're coaching him up next week. But for Shedeur, it was one drive, one game, one failure, and suddenly the entire narrative changed. They called him unproven. They rolled their eyes at his last name. They dismissed his work behind the scenes. But here's the thing, talent doesn't lie. And when someone like Shedeur, disciplined, prepared, and focused, still gets buried from the jump, it begs one uncomfortable question. What is the NFL really protecting, and at what cost to players like him? Let's be honest, not all rookie quarterbacks get the same rulebook. Some are allowed to stumble, regroup, and get handed better tools in the next game. Others, they take one hit behind a broken offensive line and the league writes them off like expired merchandise. And it's not always about raw talent, it's about perception. And in the NFL, perception is power. Take any other high-profile rookie QB first-round Golden Boys. They misread progressions. It's called processing speed growth. They overthrow receivers. Arm strength is there. Timing just needs work. They get blown up behind bad blocking. Coaching staff needs to protect them better. But when Shedeur Sanders steps onto an uneven playing field and refuses to point fingers, he becomes a punchline. Overhyped. Social media QB. Just a product of his dad's name. And that's how the narrative gets twisted, because some players are allowed to be flawed while they grow. Others are expected to be perfect the second they touch the turf. And if they're not, they become cautionary tales instead of future leaders. What Shedeur experienced in that game wasn't just poor planning, it was an example of how the NFL quietly polices who is allowed to succeed. And whether fans want to admit it or not, this isn't new. There's a pattern, and it's been running for years. Quarterbacks who are confident, unapologetically talented, and don't come through the acceptable development pipeline often find themselves excluded first, criticized second, and labeled difficult third. And if they also happen to be young black men who speak with conviction, the narrative flips even faster. Don't have enough humility? He's arrogant. Too quiet for the media? He lacks leadership. Working harder than anyone else? He's overcompensating. Running with legacy DNA? He's entitled. There's always an angle, always a reason. And with Shedeur, the attack came fast. Faster than it ever should have for a 22-year-old quarterback with no history of locker room problems, no bad press, and a mountain of film proving he's more than capable. But here's the truth, the media won't say out loud. This wasn't about his play. This was about never being in the right position to succeed. And that's how the system protects its favorites and sacrifices its outliers. Because the NFL is a business. A billion-dollar machine built on narrative, image, and control. So when someone walks in who doesn't fit their ideal mold when they can't own the story, they bury them with silence and subtle sabotage. Take a broken game plan, mix in backup players, add a high-pressure spotlight, and give zero post-game support. Then sit back and let the audience draw your conclusions for you. It's clean, it's quiet, and it works. Meanwhile, Stefanski and the Browns coaching staff gave the same recycled press conference answers. We're just evaluating everyone equally. It's about long-term development. Some positive moments in there. But if everyone's being evaluated equally, why wasn't Shedeur even given the same tools to perform with? Because the league doesn't have to fire someone to kill their momentum. They just have to hand them the wrong weapons and say, let's see what he can do. And for Shedeur Sanders, that's exactly what happened. Yet, somehow, in the middle of it all, he didn't snap, didn't fold, and didn't fire back. But whether he knows it or not, his quiet survival may have just exposed something bigger than bad coaching calls. It revealed how the NFL's double standard isn't just unfair, it's designed. When the tape stops rolling and the critics quiet down, one truth still echoes through everything we just witnessed. Shedeur Sanders did everything right and still got left behind. He checked every box: discipline, preparation, leadership, a relentless work ethic that teammates and coaches acknowledged behind closed doors. He didn't party his way through the offseason. He lived in the film room. He didn't coast on hype. He earned his spot every day, and when the moment came, when the league finally looked his way, they gave him nothing. Not the protection, not the reps, not the system, not even the respect. They handed him instability and expected composure. They threw third-string chaos at him and asked for first-round results. And when it all crumbled as it was designed to, they smiled like the verdict was written in stone. But it wasn't. Because this wasn't a true test of Shedeur's ability, it was a carefully orchestrated failure, the kind you only recognize if you've seen it happen before. And now that people are finally connecting the dots, we have to start asking the kind of questions the NFL isn't comfortable answering. How many other players get buried before they're even seen? How many legitimate QB prospects never even get the chance to show what they can do simply because they don't fit the league's preferred mold? Because they're too confident, too unconventional, or too unwilling to play political games? How many potential stars are torn down before they take their first real snap, just so no one at the top has to admit the real issue was never the player? Because the problem isn't Shedeur Sanders. It never was. The problem is a system that decides some players deserve to succeed and others deserve to disappear. This story doesn't just belong to Shedeur. It belongs to every player who's been quietly discarded under the banner of, "He's just not ready." It belongs to every black quarterback who walked into camp with swagger and walked out with a label he never asked for. And don't misunderstand, this isn't a pity party for Shedeur. He wouldn't want that. He's still working, still staying sharp, still taking accountability for mistakes he didn't cause. That takes strength. But even the strongest young talents can't win when the rules shift against them. So the real question is, how long is one player supposed to carry the weight of a broken system? Because no matter how tough he is, no matter how poised he sounds at pressers, no matter how far he's willing to walk through this fire, none of that changes the facts. Shedeur wasn't given a real shot. The tools for growth were never placed in front of him. He wasn't developed. He was managed, not by fate, but by strategic design. And if the league can do that to a quarterback with his name, his resume, and his level of preparation, what chance do the rest of them really have? Because when you bury a player like Shedeur, you don't just waste talent, you hide it, you twist it into a cautionary tale and sell it back to the public as proof that he wasn't ready. But fans are waking up. They're watching the footage, listening to the analysts, reading between the lines of every bland press conference, and they're beginning to realize this wasn't about one preseason game. It was about protecting the machine at the cost of one man's entire career. Now we want to hear from you. Was Shedeur Sanders quietly set up to fail? Or are people just looking for an excuse to rewrite a bad debut? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't hold back. Let's talk about how many more careers might be at stake. Because Shedeur's story? It might just be the beginning of a much bigger conversation.